came up here 33 years ago, and I know that doesn't make me a native New Hampshireite, but pretty close. I grew up in upstate New York. My parents were both union members. My mom actually was retired a few years ago as vice president of SEIU 1199, the nurses union in New York State. Her parents, grandparents were all, her parents, both of my grandfathers were union members in New York City as well. My grandfather started the Brewers Union at Rheingold Brewery when he worked in the Bronx, and his best friend died cleaning out a beer vat. And so he got started in that. And so my mother then and my father were both union members as well. And so I grew up in a household in which my mom was constantly fighting for the rights of nurses. And I would go to picket lines with her, and I'd always hear about the struggles. And I was actually part with her of the most historic settlement in the state of New York against Mercy Hospital for the rights of nurses who were locked out of their jobs for an entire winter. It was dubbed the No Mercy Hospital. And so I remember how cold it was going to the picket line with her and fighting. It was a lot about, not just about wages for the nurses, but mostly about professional, being treated like a professional in the workplace. So that was a big part of that. And she was the driver behind the biggest settlement in that case in the state of New York. So I grew up in that circle, always hearing about how, women should be self-sufficient. And, I had a very early interest in science. I was a little picking up rocks on all of our family vacations all the time. And I remember one time I was out west for a trip, and I came back, and my father picked me up at the airport. He picked up my bag. He's like, "There are rocks in this bag?" And literally, it was filled with rocks. So I had a very early interest in science. My parents really wanted me to go to school. I went to Syracuse University for undergraduate. At that time, in 1981, computer science was big. It was a new thing. So I started out in computer science. Did not like it, and I called my mom and I said, I really have to figure something else out my freshman year, and she said, well, you've always liked rocks, so why don't you study geology? Try a geology class. So I did, and I loved it, and that was my degree. And then in 1985, I moved up here to go to UNH, graduate in the graduate program in the Earth Sciences Department. Went through that in 1988. I left that, and for about a year and a half, I taught math and language arts at Hampton Academy Junior High School for disadvantaged children. And then I got a job as an environmental scientist, and for 30 years I've been in that field. 20 years of that I operated my own SBA certified woman-owned small business doing environmental work in this area. And then a couple of years ago, 5 years ago or so, my stepfather came down with a severe neurological disorder, and I started to throw myself into trying to help figure out what was wrong. And so through that process, I got really interested in doing something different. And I thought, well, I met the head of the Department of Georgetown University in this program, this public health program, and he said, you're perfect for my program, please apply. So I did. And I was already thinking about going back to school for something. I thought maybe an MBA, but it wasn't quite right. And when he said that, it was the perfect timing. I started to go to school and actually graduated 2 months ago with a master's degree from Georgetown in public health. So now I have an understanding of toxins in the environment and how that affects public health. And that's really important because I was already thinking about these things when taking classes in this in 2014, when my son came home from school at Rye Junior High and said, there's a lot of talk at school about these other kids in the class that in his grade that are sick, and they're literally very, very sick and dying. And literally one is right now holding on for dear life in Rye, and it's very upsetting. I reported it then to the state. I knew that it was a cancer cluster because of my education in this field. So I reported it to the cancer registry of the state, and took 2 years of prodding to get the answer out of them, continually prodding. And finally in 2016, in February, they asked myself and another mother from Rye to meet them at the library. And we did, and they told us, yes, it's a cancer cluster. In fact, it was a double cancer cluster, 2 different kinds of cancers. And but they were going to take a wait-and-see approach. And I asked them, as an investigator of environmental issues, can't you take a sample of the soil? How about the water they drink? How about the chemicals in their body? Do blood samples? No, 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 no. It was a very tense meeting. They had a public relations person there who's not very happy with my line of questioning. And then I left there with nothing, and it was very, very upsetting. So I thought about it for about 2 days, and I was driving to Logan Airport for a business trip, and I was in Revere where those gas tanks are, and I said, I just can't let this go. So I called up Jeff McNamee from the newspaper, Portsmouth Herald, knowing I knew about him because I was reading about the Haven well closure. I knew that he was a pretty responsible reporter. He wasn't apt to make people upset about things. He was pretty accurate. So I called him anonymously and reported it. And then the next day it was in the paper, and the whole thing blew up. There were a series of meetings in Rye. There were probably some in Newcastle too, Greenland. And the people whose kids were sick with cancer weren't even told about the cancer cluster, being in cancer cluster. So it was very upsetting for everyone. Governor Hassan was asked to make a task force because the parents of the kids, while we know it's a genetic cancers, there was probably an environmental trigger, so people were worried about that. So being an environmental scientist in the area, they asked me to be on the task force. So we got to work on the environmental issues possibly contributing, and the very first thing that came up was Coakley landfill. And at that time I was actually working, so one of the functions of my business was people would send me data packages and say how good is the data, and so I'd have this way of evaluating it. And I was actually working on the Coakley data when that happened. And it started blowing up, and I got the data that said that the contaminants were really high, the PFAS compounds. And I literally opened it up, I was looking at it, and I just said to my family, I can't do this anymore. This is a big problem. I have to stop doing this kind of work. And luckily my family was very supportive of that. And that was the end of that, and went to full activism mode on these issues, because I knew that my background would be the only way. I could tell that the stuff that was going on, the stuff that happened, I could already tell that was going to be the only way to get the answers. And we're still fighting, literally to this very day. There's a lot of stuff still going on. It's probably right now, the story's probably up right now, that just happened. They're trying to blame it on the cat material, or the landfill, just a bunch of bunk. So continually fighting for those issues. And then as I got to know in the community and on the task force, I got to know Dr. Sherman, who's now running for Senate. And he called me one day and he said, I'm going to run for the Senate, so I want you to replace me. And I was like, you're nuts, Tom. You're crazy. And he said, no, we need scientists. And I was like, I'm a mom, a business owner, I'm going to school, I'm not a politician. And he said, no, that's what we need. And he was really right, because when I started to really think about all the issues in our community, all the people I knew about that when I went door to door telling me about, so-and-so has cancer, and I thought, this is really odd. There's a really high level of cancer. So went to Concord, immediately put 4 bills in, and like I said in the film, they did tell me to take them out. And I said no, and they said, well, just focus on one. And I said, nope, I'm going to do them. And then I went to work getting them done. And what I realized right away was Republican House of 400 people, Republican Senate, 24 people, and a governor who's a Republican. You need Republicans to get anything done. So I put my bills in, and then I made an appointment with Jeb Bradley, who's the head of the Republican majority party in the Senate, and went up there and walked into his office and saw rocks all over his desk. So I was like, I've got this. Literally, we had a nice conversation. We talked about rocks and geology and hiking. And I walked out with him signing on to all 4 of my bills that first year. And I went to the OLS office, the Legislative Services office, saw my friend Rennie Cushing. He said, where have you been? And I said, up in Jeb Bradley's office. What? No, he signed on to all my bills. He's like, okay. That probably never happens, but he said that doesn't happen. But so I got to work on those bills. Those all passed with very strong votes. 3 commissions were formed. One of the bills got tabled the first year, but 3 commissions were formed. One of the commissions converted the task force to a formal commission, which was really good because as soon as our mini-Trump governor got elected, he started making noise about not letting the task force to continue. In fact, he stopped our work for a brief period of time. So it was very stressful. We really knew we had to work on these important issues. So that became a commission, so he can't say anything about it. He did try to put an AFP person on it for a little while. I don't know if you saw it in the news, but to try to just mix it up, the guy tried to say there was no cancer clusters, no such thing as cancer. So that was really bad, but he then had to pull that guy off. So that work is ongoing still.
Mindy, what's AFP?
Americans for Prosperity.
Okay.
which is actually the opposite of their name. So the
for some Americans.
The second commission that was formed is a very important commission. It's protecting the drinking water of the seacoast. We know that the Haven well is closed, and we know that there are 2 wells in Dover now that are closed from the same contamination. And the Haven well, of course, is closed, and there's a big multi-million-dollar remediation project underway for that. I actually serve now on that RAB, what's called the RAB Remedial Action Board, I think it is. They finally had to put me on. They tried to keep me off for a little while, but the Air Force got a lot of public pressure, so they had to get me on that. So we're working on those issues as well. That is a very important commission because we know as sea level rise is happening, our aquifers are going to become contaminated with salt water. So the more water that we can protect now, we have to do it. And we have lots of issues with contamination here on the seacoast. And we have a lot of people that want to live here. We have a very big seasonal influx of people who use a lot of water. We have lots of people who have irrigation systems and things, so a very big drain on our systems and water. Hampton, they have to turn on, this is something I'm very emphatic about, they have to turn on the contaminated well, but I made them shut down periodically to blend the water in because there's not enough water in Hampton, which is a huge issue. Yeah, they don't, I give them a lot of stuff.
And bottled water isn't always safe.
That's another one of my bills, yeah.
Portsmouth's water is blended sometimes, isn't it?
It's all blended, yes. It is all blended. And that's a whole other thing that I don't, so that commission is still going on. There's once a month meetings if you want to show up to see what's going on. That's important work. The third bill was actually a really important bill. And that bill is making the Health Department, Department of Health and Human Services, and Environmental Services talk and actually use the data together. We want to make overlay maps of areas across the state where there's environmental data, overlay it with health data, and that is so that we can identify cancer clusters or chronic disease clusters before they become clusters. That's actually really important work. That's actually very important stuff that's going on there. And then as part of the work on that commission, I realized that New Hampshire has the highest rate of breast cancer in the country. New Hampshire has the highest rate of bladder cancer in the country, and we have now the highest rate of pediatric cancer in the country, in addition to this CDC-defined cancer cluster, double cancer cluster. So clearly there's an issue in New Hampshire. And so a lot of the work that I did in my second year was around some of the preventing cancer across the state. The second year I worked on 41 bills. 16 or 17 of those I wrote, I can't remember the number, but the rest of them I worked on with other people. A lot of cancer prevention, chronic disease, environmental stuff, but also other issues like trying to make sure that we have an accredited secure psychiatric unit for our most severely, people that have a lot of mental illness. They are now housed in the state prison, unfortunately, which since 1985 has happened, which is a crime in my opinion. It's really reminiscent of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest here in New Hampshire present day.
Are they in the general population though?
Sorry?
Are they in the general population?
They have a separate place, but they do intermingle actually.
They do?
Yes, yeah.
Therein lies the problem.
Exactly. And they're not really undergoing treatment either. They're basically
just being taken care of.
Right. So there's 2 federal lawsuits going on right now. 2 of the inmates or whatever the patients in there have filed. Yeah. Have filed federal lawsuits, and so hopefully, I think we have come to a point where, while we didn't get what we wanted, they want to accredit it as a behavioral health facility, is not what we wanted. We've made some progress in at least raising awareness about this issue across the state. We've done some protests, we've done a variety of things, and now the media has picked it up, and so I think if the ball is sort of rolling on how, and these 2 lawsuits are helping to get the ball rolling on trying to make change on that. There were several other bills I worked on, like parental reimbursement issues around child care. I can't remember some of the other ones. Fighting for the ability of people like UNH to be able to, UNH used funds to hire the premier union busting firm so that staff people could not form unions. So that was a big thing that, we tried to make it so that they couldn't use public funding to do that. A variety of other issues. So I also worked on bills that weren't necessarily my bills because I sat on the Health and Human Services Committee and I saw lots of bills come in Every week we had 3 to 4 bills that looked at taking away women's rights around access to health care, things like that. In particular, one bill was an abortion registry bill, which was going to collect private information about women, what kind of abortion they had, how far their term was, what type, all this stuff that was just incredibly invasive. It got through my committee with a positive vote to pass, and I was very upset about it. I couldn't do anything about it. We fought for it. It was going to go to the House floor, and I decided to go to some of my Republican colleagues and try to do something about it. So I went to a very conservative Republican, he's really kind of a libertarian guy who works with me on environmental issues, but I knew he cared about budget issues, and we never have enough money in the state of New Hampshire to do anything. And this bill was going to cost $165,000 the first year, and about $30,000 every year after. Not only to mention that it was going to collect a lot of information we don't need, because there's no public health issue, to be mean to women.
Statistics.
Yes.
Do it.
Well, it was a step, an incremental step in trying to make a case for pro-life issues. So, of course, that's where it started. Lots of those they decided not to go head on, but they would go with incremental steps. And so that's why there's so many of these. Yeah. So that man decided to help me fight that on the floor. I convinced him to do that because it was a waste of money. And then I went to Neil Kirk, who's the head of finance. He's a very conservative man, but he cares about privacy issues. So I explained to him the problems with the bill, and he said, I agree, but my leadership is in favor of the bill, so I can't help you fight it on the floor. So I went to, in fact, he talks about, we worked together on these water issues in my first session, my first year of my freshman session, and he would talk about how I was assertive, but not too aggressive, and I was bold and smart, but so he liked me, so that's why I went to him. And I know he has a lot of power, because he's head of finance. So I went to, the night before the bill, I thought, well, I'm going to try something. But the co-sponsor, one of the co-sponsors of the bill was a Free Stater who I did not get along with. And so I knew that he was very aggressive, and I could sort of stoke him up. So on the All House Reps email system, I started going at him, and I got him to admit, in front of the whole entire House on email, that it was a pro-life bill. And so after that, I walked in the next morning. Neil Kirk said, great job last night. And they both proceeded to help me on the floor, and we killed the bill, which is very difficult to do when it comes out with a positive vote from a committee and the leadership on both sides want, well, not the Democrats, but the Republicans wanted it, and they have a majority. We were able to overthrow that bill, so that was really important to me to be able to do that. I also fought for the transgender non-discrimination bill. I was a co-sponsor on that bill, and I was one of only 2 House reps that fought for it in the Senate. We got it passed after last year having it tabled. So I think, the governor signed it about a month ago, which is an incredible feat, because in a Republican House, Senate with that Republican governor, we got that bill passed. It's amazing. So I think New Hampshire has made a big step forward with respect to that. Then there was a bill that, there were 2 bills actually that were going to come to the House floor that came out of my committee with votes to kill them. And they were to put a ban on a very damaging, practice to convert people who are gay. And there were 2 bills for that, and they came across the House floor on the same day. I had gone to young Republicans who actually, it's interesting what's happening. There's a big national thing going on with people not really, a lot of moderate Republicans don't like what Trump is doing. The same thing's happening in the state of New Hampshire. There are a lot of people who are voting against the extreme right leadership on the Republican side. So that gives you a lot of opportunity to work with people. There's an expanding, depending on the issue, there's an expanding or contracting base of people to use to help get things done. So the young Republicans said that their leadership does not represent their values, so they agreed to help me. And so we got a tie vote on both of those bills on the very same day. And unfortunately, the speaker decided to break the ties and kill both of the bills. So, but I knew that there was a way that if I identified one person within about 10 hours who said they voted wrong, that we could reconsider the bill. So I worked my heart out, and I found that one person. We reconsidered the bill, and it passed to the Senate on 8 votes, and then the governor signed it about a month ago. So amazing, now we have 2 big steps forward in this state for social justice issues, and I'm very proud to have been a part of getting those done. And that is the kind of work I think we need to do nationally. In Congress, everybody thinks and knows that Congress is basically broken. There's too much division between the parties. But the same thing here in New Hampshire. 400 people in our state house. and 400 people or so, 430 something in Congress. Same size body, really the same size spread of people, different, 30% or so extreme right, and then there's that block of people that contracts and expands based on the issues. So that's the kind of work that we need to do in Congress. We need people who will go down there and not just say we can't work together, but figure out ways to work together. And I can't say that I agree with these people all the time. I mean, I have to have my blinders on and know that, okay, this is not going to work with this person, but, I could get pro-life people to sign on to the repeal of the death penalty bill because they believe in life, and some, not all of them, but many of them believe in life from throughout. It's consistent. So, there are ways to work with people on various issues. So that's the kind of thing we need to have done. 16 bills of mine have passed and been signed into law since I got elected. So I'm proud of that record. As a freshman rep, that's pretty a lot of bills, and they're very important bills, things that will prevent cancer across the state and also provide with some protections for many people across the state. There was an arsenic bill I did which is related to bladder cancer. That will reduce the rate of bladder cancer. I found out that New Jersey, of all states, passed twice more strict standard than we have 12 years ago. Their rates of bladder cancer are 350 per million. Ours are 3,000 per million. So it's clearly needed, necessary. When the State Department of Environmental Services got up and testified, they were asked in the committee, why didn't you do this when you knew New Jersey did it? New Jersey did it 12 years ago. They said, well, we just didn't have scientific legislators to mandate it, so we didn't do it. But they've known about it for 12 years. It's incredible. So I'm going to continue to work with my colleagues in the House. I have bills that did not make it last year that I'm going to continue. They've already got people to bring them in. They're going to keep going in, and they're going to keep fighting for the things that are really important. So when Carol said she was going to retire, I kind of looked at myself and thought, well, I'm kind of like her in 2006. Immediately some men got in, and I thought, well, this has been a woman's seat for a long time, and why can't a progressive woman try to run for this again? I'm like Carol, except I have a small business background, I have a legislative background, so I'm similar to her in that way, but I thought, well, I'm just going to jump in, and I feel from the fights that I had in the House for some of my bills that didn't make it, that were fought so heavily by industry lobbyists, like I had a bill to remove the spraying of pesticides on nursery schools and playgrounds for elementary schools. And literally 7 lobbyists were flown in from across the country. Actually, that was for the tire bill. There was another bill on the rubber particles on the playfields they want to put in Portsmouth. Well, there's a running list of young people who have cancer, a specific form of rare lung cancer in Oregon. The ones that are goalies and things that sort of get the particles that are disintegrating more into their breathing. And that, so I tried to prohibit the use of that on our playgrounds here in New Hampshire. 7 lobbyists were flown in from California, Texas, North Carolina to fight that bill. And they were successful, and they used things, such crazy arguments like the lead in the grass around it is really just naturally occurring. That's nothing to do with the tire pieces. And this is a really ingenious thing that tire manufacturers have done because tires are hazardous. They can't put them in landfills, so they chop them up. They sell them back to us for $1 million+ to put on play fields, and then our kids get sick. Well, maybe they do from that, but that, so I felt like that was important. Then there was another bill about the pesticide spraying that was fought heavily by Monsanto, their arms of industry lobbyists. That bill got killed, and then I had a bottled water bill, which is actually my fun bill. I put that in on, this is going to drive me crazy. But I put that in on purpose because I wanted to make a point to educate people that bottled water is not safer than your tap water. So we need to protect our tap water because bottled water is regulated by the FDA, not the EPA or the state. So you can buy bottled water from, say, New Jersey, and it may or not be as good for you as your tap water.
And it doesn't get recalled till someone gets sick.
That's right. And then, not to mention the fact that plastics are, a big problem, single-use plastics. If we don't do something about plastics, by 2050 there's going to be more plastic in our ocean than fish, pound for pound. So we have to do something about these issues. And the petroleum industry does not want you to know about that or think about that because they have plastics are petroleum-based. So these are large issues that are going on. There's climate change and drinking water contamination like at Pease. That kind of contamination at that base is similar to 611 bases now, we think, across the country, Senator Shaheen's office has said. So this is a major national issue. Climate change is not being handled with, the importance that we should be handling it with. You probably saw the newspaper articles a few weeks ago about how much commercial and residential real estate just in New Hampshire is at risk from sea level rise. So these are big issues. There are 65 million people across the world that are on, right now, refugees, leaving their homes for various reasons due to conflicts over water or food or various other issues. And then the Department of Defense does their war games, and they've simulated that they think 400 million people will be on the move by 2035. So right now there are enough people that equal the populations of Texas and California combined on the move, and then there will be 400 million by 2035, if not before, they say, depending on what happens with climate change and things like that. So major national issues that I think we need scientists to go and work on. And there's only one scientist named Bill Foster in Congress right now, and he talks about being lonely. And I know why, because the EPA is being disassembled, facts and evidence are being thrown out the window by our president. NOAA websites being scrubbed, all the climate change data. There was just a report about the guidelines used by physicians, 20 years worth of data being scrubbed off the websites. These are big issues that I think we really need scientists, and I'm so happy to hear that so many women and so many scientists are running for Congress across the country. And they're being successful too. So I'm very energized by this. There are a lot of other issues I want to fight for. Medicare for all, I think, is the way to handle our healthcare system. We need to fix it. We need to make sure everyone has access to healthcare in our country. It's a criminal that we don't provide everyone with that. And we need to drive the costs down. We have the middleman, healthcare insurance lobbyists in the middle that are making money off our system right now. I think we need to raise the minimum wage. New Hampshire hasn't raised the minimum wage in so long. All the states around us have increased the minimum wage, and that's probably part and responsible for the opioid issue that we have in New Hampshire, which I believe is now the highest in the country in New Hampshire. I watched the data, the opioid overdose issue. Sorry, I didn't say it right, but the top.
We're in the top three. We're in the top three.
Yeah.
I think West Virginia, Ohio, and New Hampshire. In some order, but I think
is that
West Virginia is. I think West Virginia is currently leading the hit parade, but it goes up and down. But we're in the top.
Yeah. Either way.
A
lot of issues to deal with. But education is very important to me too. I think that we need to make a change here in New Hampshire. We didn't fully fund kindergarten. The mean-spirited attempt to make kindergarten happen in the state is not fully funding our kindergarten, and that was something I spoke out about in my caucus. That was a dirty trick played on us as Democrats. They thought, oh, we can't, they'll vote for kindergarten no matter what, even if we attach it to Keno. And I was one of the only people that stood up and said, this is a Trojan horse bill. It is a sorry attempt at trying to fund this across the state, and it was a really dirty trick. So, that bill passed, but we need to do something about that. We have much less pre-K. We don't even have pre-K funded at all, and I think we need to have a public option for college, and I think we need to do something about college debt. I like the Purdue University program where they say after you graduate you pay 10% per year of your annual salary for paying back your student loans, and after 10 years your debt is washed away. So that's probably something we should look at. Lots of issues that we need people to go be bold about. My campaign, because of the work that I've done, because of the way I know I had to fight industry lobbyists every step of the way, I finally got my most important PSC bill passed after 2 years, and I'm actually surprised I got it passed, to be honest. But I got it passed because I asked Dan Innes to take it on, and he took it as a sponsor, and that's the bill that got passed. But that will revolutionize, I think, the way the state looks at exposure from toxins to people in their water. And that is making them focus on prenatal exposure and early childhood exposure, which is so very important because that will cut back on cancer rates in the state. And hopefully that will extend not only to PFAS compounds, but to other compounds when they reevaluate numbers. So these are the kinds of things that I fought for. I was fought heavily by industry lobbyists. So my campaign is not taking any special interest or PAC money whatsoever. You may hear other candidates say, corporate PAC, that doesn't matter. Corporate PAC, all the same. I'm not taking any of that kind of money. I think it's really important. I'm not going to be beholden to fossil fuel industry lobbyists that want to continue to keep up our carbon emissions and cause accelerated climate change. They pay off candidates, they pay off politicians all the time so that they'll comply with what they want, and we just can't do it. We need to make a bold step forward. I am going to go down there and want, I'll say 100% renewables by 2035. I know that's bold. Many progressives are backing off and saying 2050 now, but I'm going to go down there and fight for 2035. Because you don't go into a used car salesman and say, or a car salesman and say, I'll pay sticker price, and expect them to give you money back, right? You have to go in and you have to start fighting from somewhere and really negotiate. So I did that with some of my bills, like the arsenic bill. I went with a California standard, and it's 4 parts per trillion for arsenic in California. Here we have 10 parts per billion. And I got all these calls, Mindy, is that a typo? Did you mean 4 parts per billion? I'm like, no, I said 4 parts per trillion. But that's where I started from, and then I got to where I wanted. So that's the way it needs to be done, I think. We need to be bold about it. I'm not going to take money from healthcare insurance lobbyists that say we can't afford Medicare for all. This is a big thing. It was just exposed the other day. They found out that they were paying off all these candidates and politicians to say that, and even if they said they wanted Medicare for all, they would go back on that when they got elected because of the payments from the healthcare insurance lobbyists. So I'm not taking any of that kind of money. I'm not going to be beholden to these people. I think that's what we need, and there's many people now that have been elected in their primaries across the country which have done this, and they're successful. So I think here in New Hampshire, we can be successful with this as well. And I'm seeing amazing outgrowth and support for this campaign. We have volunteers every single day coming in. Melissa can tell you, we just get inundated with people and just amazing energy and support across the district. I was already working across the district before this happened on all the water issues. They actually, in Merrimack, they just gave me this pen the other night as a thank you for having fought for their water in Merrimack for 2 years. So they already know me across the district. They already know me in the northern part. As you know, I've met some fantastic people up north. So I am very confident that we can do this, and we need the support of people like you, however, to do that. We can do phone calls. There's a lot of people here who are already doing phone calls, letters to the editor, going out door to door, just spreading the word to your friends. Just pick 10 friends, spread the word, and that will get the votes. So very confident that we're going to do this if we can have your help. We really appreciate it. And donations are very helpful because we are not taking special interest money, so whatever you can do. Right now we're really geared up. We're trying to buy a lot of literature, we're buying more t-shirts, we're buying signs, so anything you could do to help would be so much appreciated. So I would love to take some questions from anyone, if you have any. Herb?
Yeah, Mindy, I just want to make a comment. It's been my experience working on Carol's first campaign and many others, which was successful, at not taking PAC money, etc. If the message is right, the people will follow. Your message is right. So I think if people get to know your message, they'll support you.
Yes, thank you. And we're seeing that, but we're not just doing, we aren't doing TV ads, but we are doing things like very innovative digital ads that are very cheap, that are, the kind of ads that when you go to CNN's website, they'll pop up. If you live in CD1, so we're doing a lot of that. That's really cost effective.
Yeah.
We're probably going to do 1 mailer. We're hoping to get 1 out. There's too many going out right now for the other candidates, but we're doing telephone banks. We're having people like you tell your friends. We're going out door to door. And I'm going to as many of these types of events as I can just to get in front of people and talk to people. And it's been very, very effective. So.
I do think lawn signs really help. It's such a silly thing.
They do, but if you see them on the sides of the road where it's not anybody's property though, that really doesn't mean much.
Yeah, no, the whole when it's in front, I'm like, oh good, oh good. Every time I drive by a friend's house, I'm like, thank you, yes, okay, good, you're okay.
Yeah. Yep, so we just got another order of lawn signs today. So we're all prepped up for lawn signs, so if we run out tonight, we can get a ton more over here, so.
Yeah, we should mention there's some outside my door for people.
Right. So I'd like to have the people who are come from far away to take them tonight, and we can bring more back to Newcastle or to the local area.
Can we get a t-shirt?
I just had to order them today, but yes, you can.
Okay, because I'm a teacher and I can wear it,
Yeah,
at the beginning of school.
Yep, absolutely.
And actually, there are lawn signs if people want to take them on their way out. And we also have bumper stickers.
Yep,
I'll
bumper
actually bring those in.
stickers. Yeah, I love seeing the bumper stickers on.
Mindy,
Yes.
I also wanted to mention, I work at the polls, and many people who normally would vote in elections seem to forget about primaries. So I really want to urge you to speak to people you know who are, going to support Mindy, or you can talk to them about supporting Mindy, get them to the polls, it is so important. I work at the polls and we sit and do this when
Yeah.
it's primary day, and we
Yeah.
don't want to do that, we want to see people show
One thing
up.
that is just really alarming to me is, when I first got into this, I'm a data person, so I started calculating out, and I could not believe that only about 25,000 people in this district vote in a midterm year primary. That's only 3% of the voting, 3%. That is incredibly low. And, if we want to make change, if we all want to make change, we have got to get out and vote. We have got to be sure that we elect the people that are going to represent us. And that includes state reps. You need to vote all the way down the ticket for the people that need to, because let me tell you, it's not easy in Concord to get things done when you have people that are going against you. So tell all your friends, not just vote on the top part of the ticket, but vote all the way down for state reps, state senators, know who you're voting for. It is so very important because those state reps, the state senators, they have a lot of say in what happens in your daily life. A lot of stuff that they do really affects you. So, tell all your friends.
Mindy, a friend of mine, John Tenner from Brookline, Mass., I think, or nearby, has been involved in a lot of campaigns, very astute guy, former lawyer. He hooked me up with a new internet-based app called Make It Personal. And the concept behind this is you simply either email or you text friends and family, and they then do the same out, and it's a multiplier, a many multiplier effect of this. It's a cool app. If somebody wants to know about it, just talk with me and I'll give you, I'll get the information sent to you. It's very good. It's called Make It Personal.
Make it personal.
The fellow that created it apparently made a lot of money in some sort of internet business, and he's had this built because, democracy is under threat right now, and so
Absolutely.
he's paying all the bills. And it's not asking for any money, it's just get somebody listed that will commit to voting and go forward.
But one of the things I should say is I am just so heartened by the young people this term. I'm very well connected to New Hampshire Youth Movement people. It's a new group of kids that have started up in the state, and they are so energized, and they're bird dogging candidates. They bird dog Sununu on the voter suppression bills, and they are just really smart kids, and I'm just so heartened. They are doing a get out the vote drive right now. They told me today 3,000 kids are trying to get signed up to vote. Fantastic. Let's support our young people, because when they came out and spoke after Parkland, it gives me chills to think about it still. The stuff that they've done, they've really made an impact, and we want to make sure that we develop that crop of new, people involved in our democracy. It's so important. And they've really done a lot in this campaign to change what's happening. They've really been active participants in this. So, did you have a question? I'm sorry.
Just, as I'm thinking about writing a letter to the editor,
Absolutely.
The main points you would want is one question, and then another question is, I've just learned that I like to have whoever I'm writing a letter for read the letter ahead of time to make sure I don't do damage.
Yeah,
is that
sure.
something somebody in
Sure,
your
absolutely.
campaign
Yep.
is going to do?
If you check the box on the sign-in sheet,
I did, yeah.
we will have somebody contact you,
Okay,
and
that would be
we
good.
have a list of all the CD1 outlets that we can give you, so
Okay.
if you can put them into more than one, because
Yeah.
we do have a big district, and there's a lot of energized people in the North Country, but still it helps to get those out into all the newspapers.
I think the public health issue is
Yeah.
just like probably the number one issue the Democratic Party in general should be focusing on. Everybody should be focusing on that. And it's directly tied to the environment. And it's
Absolutely.
directly tied to
Yeah.
antibiotics and wastewater
Yeah.
and chemotherapy agents and immunosuppressants. I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
this is why we're such a sick country.
Yeah.
That and what we eat.
Small part of it too.
Yeah, it's just alarming.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think those letters to the editor are so very important because they're like private, they're like people who endorse you, and they're very powerful.
They can
Person-to-person endorsements.
Yeah, they can.
They're very, yeah. I just want to mention one more thing I forgot to mention. So when the last summer, when the Claremont boy was lynched, the 8-year-old Claremont boy was lynched, that had been a series of, since Trump was elected, stuff that has been happening and sort of emboldening, people to do things that they probably wouldn't normally necessarily do. But so that 8-year-old boy being lynched was just the last straw for me.
That was on the picnic field, right? Was that the
He was
kid?
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
He didn't die, but
No,
it was
he
still
didn't, but it was
a
still-
dangerous
yeah, right.
stunt.
So I wrote a resolution, an anti-hate resolution, and I put it in the very first day we got back that I could put it in. And that got so much support. People, that Jeb Bradley signed on to it, Dan Innes, like a ton of people, just a ton of Republicans, a ton of Democrats. I had to add a permanent journal extension because you're only allowed certain numbers. And so that went to the Criminal Justice Committee. It got a really strong vote for that committee. That's a really tough committee. There's some crazies on that committee.
Yeah.
And then it went to the House floor and it passed 269 to 35 or something like that. A massive vote. And so that really made me feel like people are going to get out and they're going to vote this fall and they're going to let their thoughts be known with their vote. Because what has happened since Trump was elected is just not right in terms of how the discourse has turned. And I worry about kids, and that's why I talk about New Hampshire Youth Movement, because, my kids, I brought them to see presidents. We're so lucky here in New Hampshire. I could take them to meet John Edwards and Obama and Hillary and, Howard Dean and Bernie, everybody. And we're so lucky for that, and I've really tried to make sure that I instill a sense of, respect for women, respect for people of color, and to see that going down the drain right now has been so, I'm sure to everybody, very disconcerting. But that resolution passing made me feel so much better. It really made me think that we are going to do this. So as long as we all get out and vote and tell people that we just are not going to take this anymore. So I just had to share that.
I just wanted, just mention, I read an article just this week that it was like a meta-analysis, but nevertheless, it was a...
You're a scientist, you're an epidemiologist.
No, I'm not, I'm a social worker.
Oh, okay.
But childhood maltreatment is probably the #1 public health issue.
Yeah.
I think it all depends on how you slice the numbers, but it has to get to that whole piece about the adverse childhood experiences and what that means, and for late life diabetes and respiratory illnesses and cancer, decreased immunity and all that.
Yeah.
It's
huge.
It's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah. Gun violence.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Frontline just did a wonderful series. It's part 1, and there's going to be a part 2 on, and I forget, it's something Charlottesville, but amazing. If anybody see the Frontline piece on Charlottesville? It is phenomenal. Phenomenal.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, Warren. First of all, Syracuse class of '86.
Yes! 86, you said?
Yeah.
You were there at St. Robert's?
Yep. Probably different.
83.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Probably at the bar.
We'll have to talk later about it.
Yeah. I rotated, so they didn't think I was an alcoholic. So anyway, so gun rights is a touchy subject in New Hampshire, because we really have two New Hampshires here.
Oh boy,
So
tell me about it.
what is your position on gun rights?
So my position is, I grew up in upstate New York, gun culture. So I have a lot of experience with it. I'm sure, I keep thinking that one day the Republicans are going to throw up a picture of me in my pajamas with a rifle next to me that I was propped up with, which would be great, whatever. Most Democrats in this race, everyone will tell you the same thing. I believe in common sense reform. So everybody, we can agree, there's no need for assault rifles in the hands of people. There's no need for bump stocks. There's no need for high-capacity magazines. How I differ from the other people is I am a scientist, so I look at it as from a scientific perspective, though. Actually just got back from LA last week. I was asked to moderate a panel on epidemiology of gun violence prevention at a national gun violence conference. What I learned there is that I don't know anything, and we don't know anything about how to prevent gun violence, and that's because the NRA has had a stranglehold on Congress for so long that since 1996, there's never been a public health, the CDC's not been able to study how to prevent gun violence, okay? 61% of the deaths by guns are suicide, and about 38% of them are homicides, domestic violence in that group. Only 2 to 3% are the mass shootings. They make the media the most, which are the most, everybody knows about that. Unfortunately, those aren't really responsible for the most deaths. In those other categories, the biggest category, we know nothing about how to prevent those, actually. I thought that by preventing someone from getting a gun for 24 to 48 to 8 or 72 hours would help prevent suicides. Suicides contemplated are only for 5 minutes to an hour. So that means that, maybe you prevent somebody who can run into a store and get a gun in less than an hour, but most of those are happening through access to a gun that somebody already has. So we need to look at what's going on behind the scenes to figure out what's making people commit suicide. We also need to look at the demographics and all the other issues around the other 38%, that's the homicides and domestic violence, and deal with that. And I believe that, some of this could be handled if everyone had more access to health care. So I think Medicare for All would help a lot of this, to identify if people are being seen by medical professionals or community health care centers, some people, come up with ways, but the CDC needs to study it. They need to be given money and they need to be allowed to study it as a public health issue that it is. So that's kind of where I differ from some of the other candidates, because I feel like I have more in-depth scientific knowledge about it. But there's probably a story right now. A white nationalist group has targeted me personally, and it's in the news tonight, and they say they're targeting women, and they target people with guns. So, because of my anti-hate resolution. So New Hampshire is very
targeting your life,
personally.
Targeting.
They have my picture, they have my address, my phone number. They have all this stuff on their nationalist website, and it's probably in the news right now. I've asked for the AG to investigate them because they're targeting women, particularly.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, by the way.
It's okay, I'm going to fight them. They're gonna regret. They picked the wrong woman to mess with.
But the whole concealed weapon issue in New Hampshire too.
Oh yeah, oh God.
That's just ridiculous.
We need to elect a new governor because he's the reason for that. I mean, he has a lot of power, not as much now. I mean, people are really revolting against all that leadership, but
oh my God.
yeah, but I'm worried. His name, yeah.
His name.
I
forgot.
I call him Mini Trump,
Yes, right.
and he's really on good behavior right now because he knows there's an election, but we need to make sure we get people out to the polls and get him out of there.
Well, didn't he just have a meeting with Scott Pruitt? I mean, didn't he?
Oh yeah, he did.
Yeah.
And he ran on his scientific background, didn't he?
Yeah. He does not have, let me tell
done
you,
anything.
the first minute I met him, he does not have the background.
Took you a whole minute.
claims.
And he wrote an article about children have too much homework to do.
Yeah. He's the reason for the voucher bill. That was a horrendous attack on public education. And they're going to try it again. I don't know how we had enough moderate, reasonable Republicans to help us fight that, but.
Mindi, in your opinion, who's the best Democrat to run against him?
My opinion is Steve Marchand.
Marchand, yeah.
That's my opinion.
Okay.
I just feel like he's got the strongest plans, he's got the.
He spoke to the group on Plaza.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
As much as I'm all for women.
Well, you good guys.
It's all right,
Yeah.
yes. Steve's a good name.
Yeah, that's my opinion.
Yes.
And we need people that are bold now. We need to have bold people to really fight. Because when I walked into that house gallery and saw all the golden scarves around people's necks for the voucher bill, I mean, I had a scarf. I happen to have a blue scarf on that day. I'm like, I am not taking this scarf off. It's a winter, it was like a winter scarf, but I had to speak from the well and I had my blue scarf on. I'm like, I'm not taking it off. We gotta fight these golden scarves for the voucher bill. They gave them out for free. It was awful.
Yeah, because, I mean, I think isn't it Edelblatt? What's his name? Yeah, doesn't want to teach evolution.
No, he's like the mini DeVos. I mean, we have our Trump
Oh, God.
and our mini Trump, and we have our DeVos and our mini DeVos. And, he has put, so on the Cancer Cluster Commission, he put that Kenda guy from Northampton on, who proceeded to try to pretend there was no cancer, there's no such thing as cancer. And then on my Environmental Commission, he put another guy on there. So, and that guy immediately said, how do you know there's any cancer from environmental exposures at all? There's no proof. And I was like, oh my gosh, that too. And those were his appointments to those commissions.
A lot of Louis Gomer's out there.
But there is this issue here, and I think that there have been some, very effective, there's been effective litigation in terms of being able to pick apart the data, about, the link between cancer and environmental pollutions. I mean, clearly there's a link, but because, as you mentioned, so many things are not adequately funded, not good research studies, that opens a door for people to attack.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what happened with the wastewater treatment issue in Portsmouth, that, they
The
were
sewer
able,
thing?
yeah, they were able to attack on the
No,
absence of data.
I'm sorry, I will not agree with that. They did, and Portsmouth does, and I'm going to write an article about this, I've done a lot of research, they spend millions of dollars paying people to develop pseudoscience.
Portsmouth does?
Portsmouth does.
I agree with that.
And they also formed a municipal coalition with a couple of other, Dover and one other city, to pay people to do pseudoscience around the nitrate. And we know that nitrate causes cancer. I mean, and so they're trying to fight that. They fight everything. I could go into detail about a lot of stuff I know about them.
Is that John Hall and Associates, that federal, that
Sounds
national
familiar.
level? I think
Yeah,
that
they did hire them.
they attacked on a lack of data,
Right.
I think.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, I did a huge right to know request on the municipal, so I have.
Oh, good. Let's compare notes.
They would, I had to either pay, several $100s for copies, so I had to photograph all the copies in a big brown box.
From City of Portsmouth?
Yeah. So they're on my iPhone.
Was that recent?
I would say in about 8 months ago.
Well, they're not supposed to be able to charge you like that.
Yeah. Anyways.
Well, Mindy, I just want to be respectful of some
Yeah,
folks have
thank you.
far to drive, but I assume you'll be here and glad you're sitting. I was like, gosh, you're just standing for so long. But maybe we just break and people can come talk to you
absolutely. That'd be
informally
great.
and ask questions and.
Yeah,
I
thank you so
I
much.
assume we can write checks tonight, is that okay?
Perfect, yeah. Melissa
Jane, do you have
has
someplace to put them?
Please write checks. Yes, absolutely.
Yes, I do. I will go get a basket.
Yeah.
But I want to thank everybody for
Thank you
coming
so
and thank
much,
you,
everyone.
Mindy.
Thank you.